Well, hi there, all you listeners. Great to be back here again for another little, fortnight since I last spoke. So, yeah, it's great to be back here. And I'm thinking this whole week what am I going to talk about. I actually do it every week because there's so many interesting things to actually chat about. And I thought about it and I said to myself, I've been talking to all my listeners for weeks now, and weeks and weeks and weeks about birds and birds and birds. You know what? Come now February, I'm now going to change it up a bit. So now I'm going to change it from the birds to the bees. So there we go. Something slightly different. Bee eaters. That's what I'm going to be actually discussing this week. Bee eaters. So uh, let's carry on with these wonderful, beautiful birds. They're bee eaters. In the last couple of times we've been talking about passerines, and by now hopefully you'll know what it is, mostly by the shape and also the fact that they are all perching birds, as we've said before. But these are also passerines, and there are in fact 27 species of bee eaters in the world, but we are lucky enough in southern Africa to have 9 of these species. Um, these birds normally catch bees and wasps, and what they do is they normally catch them and they bring them down and they wipe them up against you'll see them wiping up against the branch to get rid of the sting and the venom. And they flip them and swallow them. This normally takes around about 5 to 10 seconds, but they're also known, especially some of the bigger species, are catching beetles and dragonflies, moths, those type of things as well. Beetles that don't fly, but flying ants on the wing, been known to take those as well. So they're very, very, very beautiful and interesting birds to watch. They're very distinctive because the way they fly and swoop down on their insects and get back up onto the branch where they normally sit. You'll normally find them sitting on the branches and they see something, swoop down, grab it, fly back up, and then start proceeding to eat it. Maybe in the same branch or a different branch, but they tend to stay in the same area. Um, but anyway, as I said, they tend to eat more bees and wasps. Right, let's start talking about the smallest of all the bee eaters, and that's what we call the little bee eater. They're fairly common. We see them a lot here, and they actually breed here in southern Africa, but they are the smallest bee eater in the whole world. They're not very gregarious, um, and they're usually found in like either pairs or very small family groups, and they normally stay there sort of together throughout the whole year. They normally excavate a small hole in a bank and usually don't use these on successive years. They normally go and make another hole um, the following years. Uh, and then they put their eggs in there and then they come out. You'll see them hanging around small branches and feeding low on the insects nearby. Um, they're normally parasitized by the greater honey guide. And as is quite a few of the bee eaters, as I'll discuss a little bit later. Um, par- Parasitized is a word that I will be discussing a bit later. It's when another bird lays an egg in a different species nest so that species can actually bring it up, as it were. So they're very lazy, and as far as that goes, they normally chuck out the other eggs and put the one in there, or it's normally bigger and hatches first, and then that one kicks out the others, and then suddenly the parents are feeding a different species altogether, but they don't even know it themselves, thinking it's one of their own. So these little bee eaters are also parasitized by uh, as I've said before, by the greater honey guide. They've got like green backs with a lovely little yellow throat and a black gorget or gorget, whatever you want to say. It's they've got buff colored bellies, and the thing that actually separates it from most is its size, and its tail is close to square, so it's actually quite easy to see because it's very small. It's got a little yellow throat, and it's very similar to the swallowtail bee eater, which I'll talk about just now, but also it's got a yellow throat. But that has a blue courgette or courgette. I don't know exactly how to say it, but it's almost like a bracelet around the throat. Whereas the little beater's got black. It's also got a blue sort of lower belly, and it has a really deep forked tail. Sorry, man, I'm kind of getting myself confused. What I just described now was, in fact, the swallowtail bee-eater. But as I said, it's also got a blue, it's got a blue lower belly, and it's got a really deep forked tail. And out of season, you can actually see them roosting in a like very tightly packed row. But they too are also parrottized by the greater honeyguide. And as I've said, now both these last two bee-eaters are common residents. The closest one to the swallowtail bee-eater is the white-throated bee-eater. And the white-throated bee-eater is not a very common bird in these areas, because they are basically black and white. Don't get confused with the white-throated and the white-fronted. I'm talking now about the actual white-throated bee-eater. They have like a black and white pattern on their head with a very conspicuous white throat. They've also got a streamer from its tail, but these are like a very rare vagrant. They were only first seen in South Africa about 20 years ago, so there's not too many of them around, but they normally move much more north during winter, at least about 1,500 kilometers north. But if you do see them, they can be seen between December and April, mostly in like low shrubbered areas, around Kalahari, but most habitats. But really, it's, as I said now, it's a rare vagrant. Now, the white-fronted bee-eater can also be found in small groups, sometimes very similar to the. Sometimes they can be seen on their own, actually, singularly. And they're the only bee-eaters in our region with just got like a red and a white throat combination. So it's very easy to identify. So if you see a bee-eater flying around with a bit of red and white on its throat, then you must know this is the one that we're coming to look at. It's a fairly common resident, and it's very, well, not a lot, not very gregarious, but they are fairly gregarious, and they also have a fairly square-looking tail, especially in flight. You can see it. Quite a few of the bigger ones you'll see, as we'll discuss, they've got this long extra sort of streamer on its tail at the back. These are normally found along riverbanks or along sort of water causeways or in dry woodlands, but they're normally only seen northwest around the Limpopo area, definitely around the Limpopo area, and in the upper KwaZulu region. They do mix their food a little bit, as I've said. They eat moths and beetles. As I said now, I think I mentioned it before right in the beginning, dragonflies and butterflies. And these two are also parrottized by the greater honeyguide. This greater honeyguide tends to get around, doesn't he? The other bee-eater, which we don't generally see a lot of, but I'm going to mention it, is in southern African region, is the Boehm's bee-eater. They also got these long streamers in their tails and can be identified from the others by their chestnut like foreheads, and they've got like an ochre-colored throat. But if you're just hanging around South Africa, you may not see these, as they are a very rare vagrant, and normally just south of the Zambezi. And normally you can see them. They are resident in Mozambique. So good luck with that one. To see one is going to be brilliant. Actually, I haven't seen one myself yet, so I'm looking forward to going up that way and trying to find them myself. Confusing species actually with this is the blue-cheeked bee-eater. So let's get on to the blue-cheeked bee-eater. Right, there are a few key features of this bee-eater, the blue-cheeked. It's got a green crown, and it's got a really pale to blue forehead, and it's got this like faded blue color, through the cheeks. It's also got a stream on its tail, but the stream isn't as long as some of the other ones, but there is one over there. It's fairly common palearctic non-breeding migrant, Yes, a migrant. First one after the last speech a couple of times ago about migrants. A pelagic migrant is a bird that actually migrates from a region which includes like Europe, Northern Asia, Eastern Siberia, and North Africa. These are very gregarious, these blue-cheeked bee eaters. You can see them. There's a lot of them around when they are around. They also roost in lines, shoulder to shoulder, and they sort of hang out in groups of 20 or more sometimes, mostly in the leafy trees and thorny trees. They normally come around, we first start seeing them around about October, and then they normally depart around about March or April, as do the other migrants of the other bee eaters that we do get here. When they do go and breed, they normally go and hang out in the shores or the lake shores and estuaries and breed along the shores of the Caspian Sea. So there you go. Another migrant is the European bee eaters, and they also palearctic migrants. They are a smaller number than the intra. There are a small number that actually are intra-African migrants. They also arrive in October, and then they normally leave also May. Oh, not May. What am I talking about? March or April. But these birds are also they're highly gregarious birds, and they hang out in flocks. I think between 20 and maybe 100 birds can be found at sometimes. It's they normally sit, and the strange thing is you'll see them. They normally sit on a tree which actually faces away from the sun. And if it does face the sun slightly, you see it sits with like a broken neck type look, and it normally has this one eye closed, the one that's facing the sun. So when you do see that, it's actually quite amazing to watch. They're also known to sort of drop to the ground and open their wings and sunbathe on the ground, or perhaps you'll also see them like on the side of a cliff, like just hanging on the cliff, opening their tails or having their tails fanned. Right, now we come to the southern carmine bee eater. Boy, oh boy, what a good-looking bird. Of all the birds, they all, let me tell you, all bee eaters are really, really, really attractive birds, but this is a really one, it's a beautiful one to behold, and it's just very, very attractive bird. It's one of, it is the biggest of all our African bee eaters, and it has this beautiful, beautiful, really striking pink plumage. And it's also got this beautiful long stream in its tail, and it's such a gorgeous looking bird. And unfortunately, you'll only see them around about between maybe August, September, late August, September. Then they also leave around March and April. And, if you do have the time to try and find one, it's really good to go and find out. And all these things I'm talking about, I mean, it's easy enough. Well, it's not easy. It's actually difficult to actually try and explain to you what they look like. But just go into one of the guides, like I said before, either Roberts or Cecil, and have a look at these birds, or even on the web if you can't get one of the books, and have a look at each one of these bee eaters, and you'll see how beautiful and gorgeous they really are. But back to this beautiful carmine, southern carmine bee eater. It's slightly different as the others, as it's an intra-African breeding migrant, and as I said, normally arrives here in August, September. But further north in southern Africa, quite a few of them have been known to actually stay, and they don't move. They actually breed in a little narrow corridor, from Botswana right across through to Africa, Tanzania, and then down a bit, and then they come back down here again. But they're normally found in open woodland and savannas, and they're very, very highly gregarious. They're often seen disputing with each other, and then you'll see them, with aerial sort of pursuits, one chasing the other one and the other one chasing the other one. It's quite a noise, and it's quite a nice scene to behold. But in the books, as I've mentioned earlier, you can actually see when they arrive, where you can find them in South Africa. And if you look closely, most of them at the bottom will tell you the dates where they'll be around seen most of the time, in what areas. One of the other ones I am going to mention briefly is the olive bee eater. Seen in southern Africa, but I don't think I've known of one. Maybe I'm wrong. People can always say it to me, but you don't normally see them in South Africa at all. they're mostly green, and they've got like a brown crown with a little white and red throat. It's different to the white-throated, but the brown crown is definitely the sort of diagnostic look to the bird that can identify it from any of the the other ones that look the same. They are highly gregarious, and they're very, very, very vocal, but at all times. And even a few of them actually forage over open waters, I believe, but I haven't seen them either. So I'm actually looking forward to that day when I actually come and get to see one. Well, folks, it's been great. It seems like it's been a very long recital on my side, because it's not easy to try and bring across to you this the beauty of the beauty of these birds. But what I have tried to do is just let you know what's different about the bird. So when you look at them, you can actually sort of say, oh yes, look at that one. It's got a brown crown, and yes, it's got a red and white throat, and it's got a black little ring around its neck, whatever the case may be. So, but it's always good to get on the into one of the books and sort of read a bit more about them, and get to know them, and even see them, mark them down as a first sighting if you have never seen one before. But these are definitely one of my favorite birds, these bee eaters. But it's really great if you guys listen to this and you enjoy it. Just make a comment and let me know what you'd like me to talk about next. It doesn't have to be birds all the time. It could be about their habits and why certain things happen. And I mean, one interesting thing I am going to talk about, I think will be next time, is the way the birds actually lay their eggs, what they look like before they and after they sort of emerge, and how they're colored, especially when it comes to the parrotized birds, and how they make their eggs look very similar to the other birds. So I'm looking forward to actually talking about that next time. So please leave me a line and drop a line, and look on Facebook or one of the other areas that we actually deal with. Yeah, give me a little comment. And until a fortnight from now, it's from Big Al. I'll say cheers.